So just a disclaimer one more time. We are recording this meeting. If you don't want to be recorded, you want to drop off now. Good morning. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining for another session of Azure Power Lunch. And today we are going to be talking about some of the key enterprise focused update in Azure Cognitive Search. So as usual, we are going to just do a quick overview of the service, what this service is all about, and just to do a level set, and then we will go through these updates and have a quick demo about it. So first of all, what is Azure Search? Azure Cognitive Search uh, is one of the PaaS service, platform as a service, which allows you to build search experiences without worrying about the underlying infrastructure. So you have your data, you can push your data in or pull data in whatever you want in the Azure Search, build indexes, and kind of create nice search experiences. So that's what it allows you to do. This is it's a win-win for both the users or consumers as well as developers. Users get a very nice search experience, just like you have with search engines like Bing or Google, where you have your kind of a navigation, you have type ahead search, things like that. On the other hand, with the um, uh, developers, you don't have to worry about uh, how you set things up. You have SDKs available, REST, kind of a REST platform available, if REST interface available that you can use to do all that. You are able to do the uh, analysis on the traffic as well to see who is searching, what is being searched, things like that. And one additional thing is it allows you to crack the document. So let's say if you're uploading data in the form of PDF files and images and like a Word document or Office document, it has the capability to use Azure Cognitive Services like Vision, things like that, to break those documents, extract the text, and search based on that. So that's very powerful. But anyways, probably we will discuss it some other time. But the goal here, and by the way, I just added these use case scenario for reference. So these are some of the use cases. And this is important. I just want to spend 1 minute on this slide. Um, so there are two ways to push data into Azure Search. One way you can do it is with uh, pushing data in. So you can call the REST APIs and push data in. So first of all, you have to build the index, which is basically how your data is kind of indexed or how it will be optimized for search. And then you can push data into it. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is that, if, for example, if your data is stored in like Azure SQL DB, Cosmos DB, Blob, or Table Store, you can use something called Indexer, which is nothing but a scheduler um, inside search, which can regularly push data in. So you don't have to worry about it as you add more data to these sources. Uh, that indexer runs on a schedule to push that, to pull that data in. So that's two way of doing it. And this is kind of what are the formats that you can have your data that Azure Search accepts. And on the other hand, these are some of the data sources that you can use for Azure Search. Just keep in mind, this is for indexers. Otherwise, if you have data in a different form, you can just push that data in using REST API. So that's always an option. Okay. Okay, this is how kind of the whole pipeline works. Um, you have the data ingestion where you either pushing or pulling data into Azure Search, pushing data into it. The next thing is enrichment of data. That's what you can do with Azure Cognitive Services to kind of extract data from by cracking the documents. And finally, when the data is indexed, you can uh, you know explore this data. You can find make it available for your consumer for search. Okay, so that's pretty much it. What are some of the key concepts? And these are very important that we're going to look. You have the index, which is how your data is stored, optimized for search. Indexer, just a scheduler, which kind of regularly pulls data in from the data source that you have configured, and the data source is a logical representation of the source of the data. For example, it's an Azure SQL, so there would be an Azure SQL data source in Azure Search, which is just a, can think of it, a pointer to the actual data source. Okay, so this is how the network architecture kind of looks like. You have an Azure consumer or a search consumer. They're calling the search. Inside search, they are indexes, they are indexers. And as you can see, it is calling to like from Azure Storage, Azure SQL, Cosmos DB, and it can also call Azure Key Vault for encryption. So these are some of the things. So that's, we will take a look at it, how some of the later, you know, kind of a latest update makes it this architecture much more enterprise friendly and kind of lowers the security risk for the enterprise. So first of all, um, the one way you can set up data sources and indexers, you can just connect to, it allows you to connect to third party, like Azure SQL and Azure Cosmos DB and providing their connection string. So a number of customers don't want to store their connection string in as a part of in Azure Search. So that's where managed services identity comes into picture. That's which allows you to give access to these data source based on the managed identity of the search. So you just create a managed identity for the Azure Search Service, and that's how you connect to those data sources using that managed identity. So no need to provide a connection string or any of that information. So that solved one problem. Second thing is enterprises don't like to connect to those data sources over public FQDN. They want to connect them, and in a number of cases through, they want to further lower the security risk. So they want to connect it. They want to lock down these data sources like Azure SQL, so there's nobody can connect them over internet. So or only can connect them through private endpoint. So how you do that in Azure Search? And by the way, we'll look at the demo as well. There is a concept of Azure Search Private Link, which a shared private link with Azure Search, which allows you to create private endpoints that are only visible to Azure Search instance of your Azure Search instance. Okay, so they're private endpoints, so you can lock down your service and create a private endpoint that is only visible to your um, Azure Search Service. Okay, so that's how you can um, make it possible to connect. That's the shared private link concept. So that further reduces the security risk. The next thing that it does is ability to do customer managed key encryption based on customer managed keys. Once again, you can create a private endpoint to the key vault. No need to connect to the key vault over public FQDN. You know, do a private endpoint, lock down your key vault account, and once again, connect to the key vault using the managed identity of the search service. Okay, so that's another step in that direction to uh, rely on managed identity and private endpoint, and to make sure. And by the way, in terms of encryption, you can encrypt index, you can encrypt indexer information, though it's just a scheduler. But yes, you can do that. You can encrypt a data source. So basically, let's say if you are using a data source and you have to put connection information, encryption can definitely, though it's just a pointer, but still it can encrypt information. Just keep in mind, you have to do encryption when you create these resources. You cannot apply encryption afterwards. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and let's move on. And finally, the one key piece there is the ability to connect to Azure Search over private endpoint. So number of customers, they don't want to connect to Azure Search instance over a internet connection. They want to connect it over a private endpoint. And that's what Azure Search allows you to create a private instance. And just keep in mind, the shared private link is independent of the private endpoint. So you can use shared private link without using a private instance of Azure Search. Okay, so enough talk. Let's uh, start with the demo. Uh, just want to know, are there any questions? Okay. So let's take a look. Let me increase the size a little bit. Okay, everybody can see it. Okay, come on. Okay, so basically, okay. So this is my resource group where I'm doing this demo. As you can see, there are multiple search instances. I'm gonna go to this search instance. This is an Azure Search basic instance. And by the way, whatever capabilities I talked about, they are supported for both basic and standard. Okay, so I have, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to show you the shared. And first of all, let's talk about managed identity. So what I have done is I have enabled managed identity for this instance. This is the object ID. So it has system managed identity and it's there. So that's the first thing you want to do. Create a managed identity by just clicking on this on switch. The next thing is let's go to networking. There are two options you see. Currently, it's a public instance. So for this demo, let's keep it public. I will show you the private instance in a second, but let's start with shared private access or shared private link. So as you can see here, I have two private endpoints that I have created, and it's very simple. Just go in here, name something like a some P or this can be any name, pick a resource from your subscription. It can be of any, right now for private endpoint, it supports storage account, Cosmos DB, Azure SQL, and Key Vault. So let's say we pick up the storage account and then we pick up like something and then you can put blob or table. Once you do that, it will um, request a private endpoint on the other side. So what will happen is a private endpoint request will be created. So let's try this. PE demo. Okay, so if I do that, it's gonna create a private endpoint request on this store. And once I go to this store, I will have to approve. So just keep in mind, it will show here pending, but you have to go there on to the other side to approve that particular private endpoint. So basically, if I'm here at the temp store, so let's say yeah. So if I go in here and if I go in networking, private endpoint connection, it hasn't shown up here. It will take a minute. It's a demo. So, normally everything runs slow in a demo. So it will take a second. But in any case, once you do that, you will have to go in here to approve this endpoint. Just to save time, I'm going to continue moving. I'm going to be using a Cosmos DB resource. I already have created a private endpoint for that. So this private endpoint, as you can see, is here. It's created. This is the resource. So basically, that private endpoint is there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a data source. Oh, by the way, before we move further, I want to show you here. This is my Cosmos DB, and this is the firewall. As you can see, I do not have any connection. The only connection I have whitelisted is from my machine. So that's how I'm connecting to it. So there is no other connection. And as you can see, these are the two private endpoints that I have created. So one of those private endpoints you saw on the Azure search site. Okay. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? Okie doke. As you can see, this is in a pending state. And if I go in here on the storage side, I can just go in here and approve it, and that's it. So this is, you will have to do it to make sure that private endpoint is in connected state. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create a new index. So if you see here in this search, there are no indexes, no indexer or data sources. So sorry, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a data source. For that, you can use Postman. I'm using this advanced REST client. It's part of Google. So, I mean, you can use whatever your choice of tool. This is my search um, instance, and I'm calling the REST API. And for that, this is the body. And as you can see, I am not using a connection string. There is no key in that. Yes, sorry, I'm using a connection string, but it's just have the resource ID. That's it. Look, hopefully everybody can see my screen. There is nothing, just a full resource ID of the resource and name of the database. That's all. And then, of course, what is the name of the container? So there is no connection string here. I'm just running based on um, managed identity. Oh, yeah. So let me just show you one more thing. Sorry, guys. If I go back here in the um, Cosmos DB, if I go into control and management, role assignment, I have given the managed identity of my search instance Cosmos DB account reader role. You have to do that. Otherwise, you will get a 401 error. And just keep in mind, let's say you get the error, you forgot to do it, then you go give the access, you have to wait for a few minutes. It takes a few minutes to, you will keep getting error. So it takes a few minutes to take effect. Okay. So we did that. So let's go back here and let's create this data source. So what I'm going to do now is just say send. It says 201. It created the data source. So now the data source is created. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the uh, indexer. So as I said, index, sorry, and then I will do the indexer. So let's go in here. This is the index. So this is the HTML, sorry, uh, JSON for the index. I'm creating this index. You can create it from the UI, but since I'm doing one more thing, I'm doing an encryption for the index as well. As I said, you can only do encryption when you are creating the index. When you're creating that, you cannot do it afterwards. It doesn't work that way. So let's take a look at this key vault. Let's see what's going on there. So I'm gonna go to this key vault. This is the key vault where I have created one key. Of course, you can create your key or you can bring your key in here. This is the, and you may want to copy this information because you will need the name of the key vault, name of the key, and this version ID. This, you will need all that information. And one important thing to keep in mind here, access policies. So I have created an access policy here for the managed identity. Just think, everything is happening through managed identity. For the managed identity of this thing, get, unwrap, and wrap key. Okay. And last thing I want to show you here, networking. This is all locked down. It only has access from my machine just because I'm doing management. Other than that, there is no access, only from private endpoint. And that's the private endpoint. Remember, this is the other private endpoint. Just for the reference, if we go in here in networking, uh, 1 second. there are two, there you should see two private endpoints. One for, now there are three, but this is for the storage that we just created. This is the key vault. So we already have that. So I have, just to save time, I created that private endpoint before, just to make sure everybody knows. So basically, managed identity give access to the managed identity through access policies in the key vault, and enable the private endpoint of the key vault in shared endpoints, the shared privately. That's you have to do. Lock down the key vault, and then let's run this index. Okay, so this is once again the um, JSON to run the index. As you can see, this is the API I'm calling, post method, and of course in the headers I have the key for the this particular search. Okay, so once I send it, it will take a second. Um, yes, so 201, it has created the index. Wonderful. Um, Index is now there. The last thing remain is connecting this index to the data source through the indexer, which is, remember, I told you, a scheduler, which is just reading that data, populating the index. Okay, so now that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna just create this indexer. Okay, let's go back up. I think this is the one. Where is the index? Okay. I thought I have one for indexer as well. Yeah, this is the one for indexer. So now I'm gonna create the indexer. So this is gonna, we're gonna go in and let me just and show you the body of the indexer. So as you know, this is the name of my data source that I have created. This is the name for my index. So I'm just creating it to run every 2 hours. Okay. So this is now the indexer has created. Let's go back to our index and to our search overview. Let's see what are the indexes. So it already indexed the data. It says it ran. And as you can see, everything is locked down. All the access is happening through the private endpoint through managed identity. Okay, that's the key thing here. And this is my index, and this is my data source. So let's do a quick search. So I'm gonna open the Search Explorer, and I have, so this is, let's say, let's get all the documents. So I have only one index. I'm gonna get all the documents. It shows all the documents, everything loaded. So this basically shows information about a hotel. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little bit different query. I'm going to use find a filter where the room rate is less than $40. I am a budget traveler, so let's try this. And it's, so the point is this thing end to end is working, but there is one thing still missing that we talked about. Our search is still, we are trying to access it over a public FQDN. Okay, public internet. That, once again, for a number of customers, this is a no-no. They want to access it over private endpoint. They have applications running. They have connectivity to on-prem through ExpressRoute, and that's how they want to access it, through ExpressRoute through a private endpoint. So how do you do that? Let's go back to this search. This is the, if we go into networking and give it 1 second, access control. If I click on this private, it asks you, this will make this search private. That's it. You won't be able to access it over public endpoint. You only be able to access it over a private endpoint. Okay. Just keep in mind when you run it, be patient. It takes some time. Sometime I have seen like 5, 10, 15 minutes. That's why I'm not going to do it in this instance. I already have an instance that is running, that where I have gone in and have already enabled a private endpoint. You see, a private endpoint has been enabled for this. Okay. And once a once you make it private, you can create a private endpoint to it. Okay. So once you uh, enable the search, then you can, enable the private connectivity, then you can create private endpoints, and that's how you connect to it. Just keep that in mind. This is the inbound. Remember, the shared private access is for outbound, from search to data sources. This is inbound, from consumer to search. Okay. With that, you can access it. It takes 5-10 minutes. And with that, just keep in mind certain things will not work. For example, remember you used to see here services, Search Explorer, import data, add index. Those things will not work. So just keep that in mind. So now I'm going to do is I have a VM that I'm running in the same VNet where that endpoint is created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run an NS lookup for that search instance. And as you can see, I get a private endpoint because I have created a private. So now I will connect to it over a private endpoint. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run the same search. So once again, this is a very similar search instance. I have the similar type of search, index loaded. Everything is there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send a request, and yes, it works. It send me returns all the data that I want. So now it is working from here. But if I come here and try to run the same request, I think it was this one. Yeah. So let me okay, let's try this. Yeah. So let me run this search here. Let's see what happens. Or, yeah. Basically, it will just time out because we're trying to access it over public endpoint, which is locked. Okay. So we have 1 more minute. Any questions, comments? Okay. Yeah, the URL cannot be reached. So basically, this doesn't, it's because the search instance is now private. So once a quick recap, Azure Search, the 3 features that we talk about, let me go back to the slide deck and let me go here. Number 1, shared private link to secure the outbound access from Azure Search to the data sources, encryption using customer managed key, and all of these are using managed service identity. And finally, ability to create a private Azure Cognitive Search instance using private link support. So that's what we talked about. Hopefully you found it useful. Looking forward to see you in a future session of Azure Power Lunch. And I hope everybody had a wonderful day. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.